BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello, Nedheads. Hello, Black Box Battalion. Today is Tuesday, and on Tuesdays this year I've been doing a segment about the disappearance of Maura Murray from 2004, and in this episode I will be talking about the underlying psychological factors behind her disappearance, responding to Dr. Todd Grande's video on the disappearance of Maura Murray, and debating the different theories in the case. And you guys know the drill. You can hit the like button if you want, subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment down below if you have something to say about Maura Murray. For larger things, you can send them to me at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. And I am your host, Black Box Ned. Firstly, I would like to give a big thank you to everyone who listened to last week's episode, which was more of an introductory one. It was called Vanished Without a Trace, Maura Murray's Disappearance, where I was responding to a short booklet that had been written about Maura's disappearance. But in this episode, I would like to talk about some of the mental health and personality factors that were leading up to her disappearance. Maura went missing on February 9th of 2004 after crashing her car into a snowbank in Haverhill, New Hampshire. Prior to her disappearance, she had been experiencing a lot of mental health issues, duress. She had also been involved in a previous car accident when she had been driving her father, Fred Murray's car. And there's a video about Maura's disappearance on Dr. Todd Grande's channel, and I've discussed his material a lot here on Black Box Online Radio, and I'm going to play a clip. It's about 6 minutes long, and then we'll have a response. I've also discussed Dr. Todd Grande's material in other cases, particularly the Zodiac Killer and Jack the Ripper, here on Black Box Online Radio, and I have some direct responses to those as well. Now, he's going to just get right to the point, because the 6-minute clip is going to just start talking about her mental health issues, as well as the theories in the case. So I'm going to play the clip, and let's respond.
My analysis. What's so strange about this case is it appears as though Murray's behavior initiated her disappearance. It wasn't like she was in her residence one day and just disappeared. She caused a collision, then disappeared. Therefore, any criminal involvement by a potential killer, for example, would have been unplanned. Nobody would have known that she was going to have this collision. I'm not aware of any mental health information available in this case. We do know that Murray appeared to have some difficulty with her alcohol consumption, but it's not clear if that rose to the level of a disorder. There's not really much available as far as personality either. It could be that she was low in conscientiousness, high in neuroticism, and perhaps mid-range on the remaining 3 traits of the 5-factor model: openness, extroversion, and agreeableness. It appears as though Murray reacted strongly to information about relationships, like the story about her sister's relationship problems and her own romantic difficulties. Leading up to Murray's disappearance, we see increasingly reckless behavior, thefts a few months before, and of course, the collision involving the guardrail and potentially alcohol use, although technically it's not known if she was drinking during that collision with the guardrail. Then, on the day of her disappearance, we see another accident. This one likely involved alcohol, as indicated by the containers in the vehicle. With all this in mind, I'll take a look at the theories in this case. I'll look at the evidence for and against them, and offer my opinion about which one I believe best explains Murray's disappearance. The first theory. After crashing her vehicle, Murray gets a ride from a stranger. The stranger just happens to be homicidal and murders her. The evidence for this theory would be that Murray is missing. She was a young and attractive female, a group that's more likely to be targeted by strangers. The cadaver dogs lost her scent, as if she just vanished from the area, and it was reported that there were no tracks in the snow, which seems to point away from the idea that she walked into the woods. Evidence against, it seems clear that Murray caused the accident. What are the chances that a killer just happened to be there, ready to pick her up? The second theory. After the collision, she climbed into a stranger's vehicle, and the stranger dropped her off somewhere. From that point, she died of exposure or dehydration from wandering around in freezing temperatures. I don't think this is a bad theory. It explains a lot of the strange circumstances in this case, like why did they never find a body? The difficulty with this theory, of course, is that the stranger would not have committed a crime. Therefore, why wouldn't they simply come forward and tell the police they had picked someone up who matched Murray's description? The third theory, this is the same as the second theory, except instead of wandering away and dying, Murray is still out there somewhere. She started a new life. This is possible, but I think it's much more likely that Murray is dead. She had no money, no training in the area of disappearing, and no connections. It would be very hard for someone who studied how to disappear to do it successfully. There's no indication Murray had any knowledge in this area. The fourth theory, she wandered into the woods after the collision and died of exposure or dehydration. I think this is a pretty good theory, except of course for the lack of footprints in the snow, her scent being lost by the dogs, and the fact that they probably would have found her body if it was within walking distance. The fifth theory, after the collision, Murray gets a ride from somebody she knew, like all this was planned. There's really no evidence to support this theory except for the fact that she is missing. It's simply one possible explanation. One would think if she coordinated all this, there would be some evidence of emails, phone calls, or something. She would have had to communicate, and likely there would be some record of at least some of those communications. In addition, why would intoxication be part of her plan? Although I guess it's possible she was not intoxicated. Maybe she dumped the alcohol out of the containers to make it seem as though she had consumed it, to create an explanation for the collision that people would believe, and that would take them away from the theory that she was planning on starting a new life. Now moving to the last theory I'll cover, theory number 6. This was all planned for her to end her life, like she drove out there to die. With this theory, exposure would have been one possible cause of death, but I suppose there are any number of ways that she could have brought an end to her own life. This is consistent with her drinking, because drinking is connected to depression, but it seems odd to me that if this were her intent, she would have grabbed those forms for reporting the accident, the prior accident she had with the guardrail. Also, why would she have bothered to call the nursing school and make an excuse for her absence? All of these theories are based on the fact that Murray did not want the police called after the collision. That is what the bus driver reported, and there's no really good reason to doubt he was relaying something accurate. So what do I think happened in this case? This is just speculation. This is my theory. I think a key part of this case is really the alcohol. It seemed to have a grip on Murray. She could not regulate her intake. Whatever pain she may have been feeling, the alcohol took it away temporarily. Some stimulus, perhaps something related to a relationship, like a romantic relationship, was too much for Murray to process. She bought the alcohol, and she wanted to run away from everything so she could drink without any restrictions. She started a little early, like on the drive, ended up colliding with a tree, and then she wandered off into the woods and died. It was pretty cold outside, and there was snow on the ground.
And one more time, that was from Dr. Todd Grande's YouTube channel, where he was discussing the disappearance of Maura Murray. So firstly, I think that that segment that you just heard was very awkwardly phrased. I think that it's almost something that misrepresents the issue when he talks about how Maura initiated the disappearance, when he talks about how Maura caused the crash which led to the disappearance. That's almost victim blaming, and I don't think that's what his intention was, but it came out that way, and I thought that there was something that was almost just insulting to the victim, and it's purely his awkward choice of words. Again, I don't think in his heart of hearts he was trying to say anything bad about Maura Murray. It just made it seem like everything was her fault. Just because somebody got into a car crash, and let's say hypothetically they were abducted, that would be of no fault of the person who got into the car crash, because they didn't tell somebody else to do anything illegal to them. They also didn't ask for anything illegal to happen to them. And that's just what my immediate response was. Now, this video was better than some of Dr. Todd Grande's other creations on his YouTube channel. I didn't particularly like his Zodiac Killer video, and I absolutely did not like the Jack the Ripper video. But I do like his content when he's actually talking about psychology, when he talks about issues like narcissism, when he talks about problems in relationships. And sometimes he can make cases very interesting that I'm not familiar with, telling stories that are in the news headlines. For about 2 years, I didn't watch his channel, but I've started again recently, and sometimes, he'll just have an attractive headline that will get my attention. But with the Maura Murray case, I think he might be under a few misapprehensions, but I also think that he made some good points at the end of that clip. The misapprehensions would be related to how, even if Maura got into a car accident, then somebody came by, that doesn't mean that there was just an opportunistic serial killer in the area. Maura's driving her car down Highway Route 112, right? Or Route 112. We don't even call it a highway. Her car goes off the road for some reason. The airbags deploy. Maura gets out. She talks to Butch Atwood, the school bus driver, who then goes back to his house, does his paperwork. His wife calls 911, and by that point, Maura is missing. Now, if she got into somebody's car, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was an opportunistic serial killer. That doesn't necessarily mean that it was an opportunistic murderer. She could have received a ride from a man who drove her someplace, and then he may have thought that she was interested in him. He made an advance on her, she rejected him, and he either panicked or he got mad or some type of unplanned result led to her death. And again, that's not an opportunistic murderer, that's a situation that got out of control. Another theory that I've discussed in the past here on Black Box Online Radio was that Maura could have entered the vehicle of a woman, and then she drove Maura to a place where she met up with someone who caused a type of fatal injury. So, just because Maura got into somebody's vehicle, it doesn't mean it was the vehicle of an opportunistic serial killer. Now, another point that has been shared in this video that I think is very interesting is the entire concept of how Maura could have died in the woods because of natural causes, but at first she received a ride from somebody. Now, it's my understanding that they scoured the radius around Maura's crash site. The car goes off the road in Haverhill, New Hampshire, near the weathered barn, and they searched the 5 to 7 mile radius extensively over the last 25 years. However, they did not find any trace of Maura. Not only did they not find her remains, they didn't find physical items like a shoe or a backpack. They didn't find anything. And when I first learned about this case, it wasn't 25 years after the disappearance, it was only about 15 years after the disappearance. And I simply said that, this is one where it seems like she's most likely outside of the 5 to 7 mile radius. That's what I called the Master Yoda logic. I mean, if her body has not been found in that location, then she's beyond that location. And that was one of the first things that came to mind when I learned about the disappearance of Maura Murray. And that was that, she could have received a ride from somebody else and then was driven beyond the expected search zone, and then she went off on her own way, and then she succumbed to the elements. But the problem with that theory is, and I do agree with Dr. Todd Grande on this one, that there's no evidence to support that. If somebody did not harm Maura Murray, I mean, how hard would it be for somebody to just say, yeah, I gave her a ride. Yeah, she was walking down the street, and I said, hey, would you like a ride? And I dropped her off at this gas station. Why would somebody withhold that information after all these years? Why would somebody not just come forward, especially with the amount of publicity surrounding this case? And this is also going to be a missing persons case that is going to be more widely publicized than other missing persons cases. And it even gets to the point where certain people who may have seen Maura on the day of her disappearance simply say, I'm tired of answering questions about that girl. That was something from the Missing Maura Murray podcast. But overall, though, I also want to use a portion of this episode to talk about the possibility of Maura ending her own life. And Dr. Todd Grande seems like he has brought up several strong points for that. Now, as you heard, that's not his go-to theory in the end, but I actually thought it was. When I was watching his video straight through for the first time, I thought that he was going to take the stance that Maura had taken her own life, and that's what I would like to spend the second half of the episode discussing. But I think that there are certain key points that he notes about this. Number one, Maura was drinking heavily. Number two, she was most likely drinking heavily to deal with stress, or maybe she just developed a habit, and when she was not intoxicated, then she began to feel bad. That's something that can also take place. She was most likely not overly intoxicated when she left the crash site, so that couldn't be interpreted in any particular way. It's also most likely that she had one bottle of alcohol with her, and he seems to point out certain things that I also am very surprised about. If we're going to talk about Maura trying to take her own life, and this is what this whole plan was, then there are several important things we have to remember. When someone is trying to do this and going to the lengths that Maura hypothetically would have gone to, they're doing it because they don't want to be interrupted. He's asking this question. Well, why would she email her professors and say she's not going to be in class next week if she's just planning on taking her own life? Well, why did she pick up the accident forms from the DMV if she was planning on taking her own life? Because they're acting out the series of motions. They're going through a series of motions because they want everything to seem normal to other people. But as we're going to see later on, Maura didn't do that completely. So I would just have one final statement, though, from Dr. Todd Grande's video. At first, I thought that he was being way too assumptive. I thought that he was just ruling out possibilities that shouldn't have been ruled out. But at the very end of that video clip that you heard, there was something that was really interesting, and that is that he says that he believes that Maura would have gone either down the road in someone else's vehicle, maybe by her own accord. She did not enter the woods immediately, but ultimately she did, and then after some time in the woods, she may have tried to find warmth in a place like a ravine or some type of abandoned structure, and then she froze to death, maybe also while drinking from the bottle that she had in her backpack. And I think that this is a really interesting way of looking at it because it's adding an element to the accidental death theory, and that is that Maura could have found a very specific hiding spot that she was using to stay out of the elements that she actually thought would shelter her, and that wouldn't be something such as a person who's passing away because they've given up. That would mean that she is actually just trying to rest for a second. She passes out and freezes to death. Now, where would this abandoned structure be? I have no idea. Where would this ravine be that he's talking about? I have no idea. And there is not any evidence to support that. That is just conjecture. But it's somewhat of a reasonable observation. One theory that was dropped in the comment section here on Black Box Online Radio in the past was that Maura may have tried to take a shortcut through the woods. She may have tripped over a log and had something like a sprained ankle, maybe even a broken leg, and then she tried to get to a place such as Dr. Todd Grande said about the ravine or an abandoned structure. But if she were in one of those places, it would have to beg the question about how was there such a substantial distance from the crash site to this place where Maura died, and why has the body not been found in 25 years? Please let me know what you think about the accidental death theory in the comments section down below. I would love to read it. And I also want to use the remainder of this episode to talk about something that I've never shared before on the channel. I think I miscounted the years when I first learned about Maura Murray's case. It was actually in 2015, so that would only be 11 years after her disappearance. And I started out by listening to the Missing Maura Murray podcast, and they were also asking their audience if they had ideas for future episodes, and they had many guests on the program. And one thing that I thought of that I actually wrote out, and I don't believe I actually sent it to them, but it was an idea for an episode, and that is, what would happen if you had 3 or 4 people on trying to debate the likelihood of the different possibilities and outcomes? 3 or 4 people debating about what could have happened to Maura, because, I mean, Dr. Todd Grande is very expansive with his options, but mostly I narrow it down to 4 possibilities. Number 1 is foul play, number 2 is accidental death, number 3, Maura left to start a new life, and number 4 would be ending her own life. And, I mean, this is the stuff that I've truly, truly never shared with anyone. Out of those four, the one that I had considered least likely was Maura taking her own life. This was back in 2015. And I thought, the Missing Maura Murray guys have also not had anybody on the podcast who has been telling this case, or they haven't been sharing this point of view that Maura took her own life and this was what the whole plan was. So I decided to write out all the major points in favor of this interpretation of the evidence. And I did something that really shocked me. For about 2 weeks in 2015, I had convinced myself that Maura had taken her own life. It was the entire concept of getting caught in a mental loophole. I mean, I looked at the evidence, I evaluated the evidence, and I created an interpretation of the evidence that showed that the most likely outcome was that Maura took her own life. And ultimately, I realized that you can get caught in mental loopholes, and I dealt with that one firsthand because I wouldn't necessarily say that that is my go-to theory now, but I will share with you the thought process that I went through. And I also want to point out that there are several comments that came in on last week's episode about the disappearance of Maura Murray here on Black Box Online Radio. One more time, you can hit the like button and subscribe if you want to follow along with all of these discussions. And one of them comes from Trashly, who says, I was reading a bunch of reports on the 107 Degrees page, or whatever that podcast is. And yes, the 107 Degrees podcast covered the Maura Murray case. And I was really surprised to see both her other sister, who didn't do the Media Pressure podcast, and her dad reacted in a way that suggested that Maura committed suicide. Her sister even said that Maura had been suicidal in the past. So, I don't know. Maybe that's where she was going, and maybe that's what she did. Her dad did mention a squaw walk, which is walking off into the woods and dying. Well, if he said any of those things, maybe he will share that on Media Pressure. I'm going to go through that podcast for this segment here on Tuesdays. But in the past, the family has been very adamant that they think Maura was abducted and murdered. I mean, Fred Murray said it clearer than anyone. He thought that a local dirtbag had snatched her, and that even prompted an individual named Alden Howes Olson to make a video using the name 112 Dirtbag and saying happy anniversary, where he was just laughing and acting like, presumably acting like he was the person who had done something to Maura. The family has been very clear in the past that they had believed that Maura was abducted. And again, this doesn't have to be an opportunistic serial killer. This could be somebody who just let Maura into his vehicle, and then he misunderstood the situation, and maybe he did something accidental that caused her death, as opposed to homicide. There could be so many possibilities, and we just simply would not know. We simply do not know based on that information. So I really am not even quick to jump to the conclusion that she was abducted by a serial killer. Now, as I just told you, though, the family believed that Maura was abducted and murdered, and one thing that Fred Murray was very adamant about as well is that Maura would not have ended up the way that Dr. Todd Grande stated, that she would have gone down the road for a while, entered the forest, maybe some accident happened, maybe an accident didn't happen, and she tried to find warmth in a ravine or an abandoned building. I mean, Fred Murray was very much opposed to that. He said that Maura would not have done that because she knew better. She was an experienced hiker. She knew not to enter the woods. She knew not to just go into near total darkness to take a shortcut late at night. He said that that would have been against her instincts. And this is her father talking. This is somebody who knew a lot more about her thought process than we do. So that's some challenge there. But there was another comment that came in from C.G. Karras on last week's episode that says, what does it mean that in her dorm room she packed her stuff up in boxes and took her posters down? All right, excellent, perfect. I'm so glad you brought this up because this became the foundation of that theory, the interpretation of the evidence that Maura took her own life. Number one, Maura's stuff in her dorm room was packed up. Her posters had been taken down. Now, was she planning to redecorate, or was she planning to never come back? The reason why I was formulating this interpretation of the evidence years ago was because I first noticed that that I was like, it seems like Maura was trying to appear normal to everybody. Emailing her professor, she's working the overnight security job, she's telling them that she has a family emergency, she's telling them that she has a problem with her sister, she's picking up accident forms, and she's going to an ATM. So it seemed like she was trying to make everybody think that she was normal, but behind closed doors, literally and metaphorically speaking, she was acting like maybe she was never planning on coming back. And furthermore, this would not include a tandem driver theory or Maura leaving with somebody else to start a new life, nothing of the sort. For the following reason, Maura left the alcohol in the car. She had a box of Franzia wine coolers, a bottle of Kahlua most likely, and the Kahlua bottle was not found in the car, which suggests that Maura took it with her and put it in her backpack. But if she were going to meet somebody, she probably would have taken the alcohol with them if that was just the plan, to go to a motel and get drunk for a week with somebody. Then she probably would have brought the alcohol in that other person's car. So I think that that is a big strike against the meetup theory or the tandem driver theory. That means that Maura was possibly looking for a place where she was thinking about taking her own life. Maybe Bartlett, New Hampshire, maybe Stowe, Vermont, the White Mountains, and she wanted to just go and do what she perhaps had developed as a very bad habit, and that was drinking alcohol by herself for a while and doing it in an uninterrupted area. Maybe she didn't want the family to find her, and it is very similar to that squaw walk theory that Trashley laid out, and that was the type of thought process that I got pulled into. Number one, she didn't tell anyone about what she was doing. There is no documented evidence that Maura made this plan with anybody else. No emails, no text messages, no secret conversations with her friends Sarah Alfieri and Kate Markopoulos. There is no plan that was put forward. Everything is just looking like Maura did this by herself. She was trying to be alone. She was dealing with mental health issues. She's definitely dealing with stress and duress. And I mean, that just is somebody who is acting like they are not planning on coming back. And once the car went off the road, she's like, all right, my plan's interrupted, and there is somewhat of an improvised plan, and that would ultimately mean that Maura entered the woods to take her own life, perhaps just by getting drunk and freezing in the cold. Sounds like a terrible way to go. The problems that I have with that theory now is that, number one, Maura's body has not been found. Maybe Todd Grande had a point when he's like, we can look in abandoned structures, look in a place like a ravine. Maybe she's farther than 5 to 7 miles. I mean, it's possible that the search dogs lost her scent because she started running, and that the sunlight had destroyed the moisture in the air that they could have used to track her scent. So that could be a simple explanation as to why she went missing. The reason why the dogs lost her scent is so close to the crash site. Maura was running down the road. Maybe she ran for 5 miles. That's not impossible. Maura was a long-distance runner, although it doesn't seem like she necessarily did distances that were that long, but it seems like she had the physical capabilities to do that. So then, Maura would have gone down the road by her own volition, and I'm still going with the abduction theory because I think that one explains so many things about why the body was never found, why none of Maura's belongings were ever found. If she died in the woods, then where's the physical evidence? If she entered somebody's vehicle and that person drove her to a place and then did something bad to her, then you have a completely different search radius. What do you think about my interpretation of the evidence? What do you think about the claim that Maura was trying to end her own life, that she had this secret going on, that she was actually dealing with some very intense mental health issues? I mean, please let me know about that. And again, that's something that I thought about in 2015. I don't stand by it now. And I also want to be very clear that I haven't continuously followed the Maura Murray case since 2015. I have explored it for some time, and it's not been the primary focus of this channel, so I am the first to admit that I am not an expert, but I do appreciate Dr. Todd Grande's analysis. I think this video was better than some of his other videos, but not perfect, and I thought that he was rather assumptive about some certain things that he was making. So please let me know, what do you think? What do you think about my comments? What do you think about his comments? What do you think about the theories that have been discussed? And I would like to do an episode in the future where I'm discussing some of the other theories and the other evidence in favor of the other possibilities. So please put your ideas in the comments section down below. You know where to write the show, blackboxonlineradio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook name is Ned Dahan. And then there is blackboxned88 on Instagram. And I use these platforms to release shorts and reels Monday through Friday here on Black Box Online Radio and BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram. They mostly talk about serial killers, unsolved mysteries, and anything under the sun or in the darkness. And there are also other episodes that come out here on BBOR talking about Jack the Ripper, the Black Dahlia, D.B. Cooper, and most famously, the Zodiac Killer. And if you want to support all of these efforts, you can go over to buymeacoffee.com. buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88, and that allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. And I will see you tomorrow for an episode about Jack the Ripper. Until next time.